As an ex-professional hockey coach, today I'm going to let you know my unbiased, unsolicited opinions on whether Nick Saban and the game of college football passed him by. Michael McLean.coach. I am an ex-professional hockey coach, ex-amateur championship coach and team owner, turned 8-figure entrepreneur. If you would like to receive these ugly, broken iPhone videos, me out walking around Naples, taking you on a mini adventure every morning at 6 a.m., go to michaelmclean.coach and sign up. There's nothing to buy, email, and name, and I'll be in your righteous email box every day at 6 a.m. I don't miss, I don't take days off. I'm out here every morning, walking, talking, and taking you on a mini adventure. So the news from last week, one of my all-time favorite badass sports coaches, certainly the greatest of all time in college football, the great Nick Saban, finally let it slip. And what I mean is let it slip. When Saban had announced his retirement a month ago, he did the typical politically correct, very smart, very intelligent. It was time for him to go at age 72. He wasn't sure if he had the energy anymore to make commitments to his players, 3 years, 4 years. And it was just the perfect time for him to finally retire. I knew that the truth was going to come out. A guy like Saban is a time bomb. He can't be dishonest. He can't, no matter what he does, eventually the truth will always percolate out. He's that type of brass balls coach, that type of brass balls leader. The truth is eventually going to come out. So last week, the truth finally came out, and it's interesting because the normies and the punch-drunk tomato cans and the talking heads will all talk about, he couldn't compete anymore, and time has passed him by, and they'll talk about the hypocrisy of it all. Saban making $11 million a year, and he doesn't want his athletes to be paid, and the NIL program, and how the game has changed. And they'll miss the entire point. I think the biggest point of all this is the rules have changed in college football. The rules change every decade in sport. The rules change when I was in pro hockey. The rules changed when I took a sabbatical for 10 years. I came back to junior. The rules had changed. As a great, outstanding coach like Nick Saban, you just have to decide throughout your career, as things are constantly being, shifting. The sand is always shifting, sometimes for good, sometimes not for good. You just have to decide how many more times you want to do it. Because when you're a guy like Saban, the program in Alabama is built on personal development. He recruits the type of player, the type of mom, the type of dad, and I've been in this business knee-deep recruiting players for 21 years with my junior teams, you're a niche marketer. You're recruiting a very specific type of person, a very specific type of family member. And in Saban's situation, where he rebuilt Alabama, he took a broom to the place 20 years ago, and he started recruiting some of the top blue chip athletes in America. But the other thing Saban did is he sold, his two big things were, your kid's going to graduate, which is music to most parents' ears. He's going to graduate, right? And he backed that up with some of the best graduation percentages in the country over the last 17 years. The second thing that Saban would promise to the player and to the parents, or grandparents, depending upon the situation, is I'm going to do everything I can to prepare your son for an NFL career. And once again, nobody put more guys in the NFL. No coach made more players NFL ready from the age of 18 when they go to Alabama, and then 22, 23, they're ready. And the point is that Alabama runs a program under Saban that is much more difficult, much more challenging, and much more professional than a lot of NHL programs. I mean, when their best players are drafted into the NFL, I used to hear stories when they're drafted to one of these country club last place teams in the NFL, the Alabama player is like, whoa, this is a major step down from college. That's the type of program that Nick Saban was able to create, and it's all about standards. It was the same. Harbaugh was the same. Like any great college coaches in any sport, they run a program that's superior to a lot of NFL losing programs. So when the players finally get drafted, top players get drafted to the worst teams, the worst programs, a lot of times there's like, wow, what happened? Our weight room was better. Our nutrition was better. Our practices were better. Our plane was better. But at the end of it, I truly believe that Nick Saban was thinking about retiring for the last couple of years. He admitted that he had mentioned it to the person he answers to, because, I mean, the guy's 72 years old. He works 14 to 18-hour days. And I'll never forget one of the greatest coaches in junior hockey in Canada telling me one time, the great Brian Kilray. He's the Nick Saban of junior hockey in Canada. And Kilray used to always talk about when he was coaching into his 70s. He said, every year I show up at training camp, he says there's one more year divide between me and the players. So in Kilray's case, the kids are 16 to age 20, 21. And Brian would show up every training camp. He's in his 50s. Then a decade later, he was in his 60s. And then he's coaching in his 70s. And he was self-aware enough to say, I'm going to go out on my own terms. I'm not going to be like most coaches and most athletes. I've been in the game a long time, in the hockey game. And, most pro athletes, you gotta tear the jersey off their back. You literally have to tear the jersey off their back. They don't know any other life, right? They don't go out on their own terms. They're told that they're cut, or they're told by their agent that nobody wants to employ them. You have to literally tear the jersey off their back. Well, a lot of coaches are no different. Some of them are former players, and it's a situation where it's like, look at Bill Belichick. I mean, there's what people consider, one of the greatest of all time in New England. And the fact of the matter is the NFL, at least for this year, sent a clear message to Bill Belichick that, your services are not wanted here. Certainly not as a general manager, certainly not as a head coach. A lot of people thought that, when Belichick left Kraft and New England, there's automatically a big job for him, right? He's going to Atlanta. People are going to stand in line. And the reality is, because of a lot of things, the way Belichick treated people, but most importantly, his record the last handful of years without Tom Brady, and his draft record and his development record, NFL teams slammed the door. They said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to hire you as our general manager. We're not going to have you in charge of our rebuild. And we're certainly not going to have you coaching our team. And that's the NFL, not for long. They don't care. They don't care about six Super Bowl rings. They don't care about that. So it's interesting. That's like tearing the jersey. Like, Belichick wants to coach, right? Like, don't think that guy for a second doesn't think about, I could be a defensive coordinator in San Fran and we could win another Super Bowl there. Like, don't think for a second that doesn't cross his mind. But the big thing is pride will keep him away from that. But at the end of the day, he's like 72 as well. And for the first time, like Saban, since they were unpaid graduate assistants, newly married, working for free, learning the game of football for the first time since they graduated from college or were in college, these guys aren't in the game. You imagine what Bill Belichick's doing today? Like, how many times can you take your boat out fishing? Nick Saban, I think that he's going to be busy enough in retirement, but this is a serious consideration for these guys, and their girlfriends and their wives and their families understand it. Like, they're going from, you know, one of the most demanding jobs in the country to crickets, you know, and you can only golf so much, you can only fish so much, you can only talk on TV so much. So I think for Saban, it was he decided that, you know what, with what's happening in college football, with the nil program, and he said it, he came out and he said, you know, I'm talking to 70 to 80% of our players and recruits. He's out there recruiting, and he's getting the same two questions, which is, and this is not new to anybody else. Number one, they want to know how much they're going to play before, you know, if I'm not going to play, I'm going to transfer out of Alabama. They don't give a shit about Alabama. They don't give a shit about Nick Saban, and they don't give a shit about the school. What they care about is playing time. And if not, they now have the right to transfer. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's totally different. So Saban isn't the type of guy who wants to be in that type of environment. So the second thing the players would tell Saban, whether he's recruiting them for the first time or whether they're on his team returning, is they're like, how much money are you going to pay me? How much money are you going to pay me? You make $11 million a year. I have no money. My college career is 3 to 4 years. There's no guarantee of the NFL. How much are you going to pay me? You know, Michigan's going to pay me this much. Ohio's going to pay me this much. They're guaranteeing playing time. So this is what he's dealing with that he's never dealt with before. And this is a process too. And I believe that college football will find a balance eventually. But for right now, with the nil program, with players being paid, with the transfer portal, I just think college football and college basketball, and won't be long until college hockey, that they're in a transition phase here where you're going to see a lot of the old school coaches, if they don't retire, you're going to see guys like, you know, you're going to see guys that are paid big money as head coaches in college take, you know, jobs where you can be just a coordinator. Okay, bring me in for $2 million. You just saw that, where, you know, Chip Kelly, he's like, I'm going to turn down $8 million a year, and I'm going to take a job as a coordinator where I can just coach the kids. I don't have to worry about recruiting. My off season is my off season, and you can pay me $2 million. Because when you have a stack of money like those top guys have, what's the difference? Like, you tell me a guy doesn't make, you know, if you're paid $8 million or you're paid $11 million, you don't think Saban's worth every penny of that? Like, the amount of money, like, you'll have the chairman or the whatever the hell his name is there of Alabama, and he you know, here he is 17, 18 years, and he's like, the best decision this university ever made financially was hiring Nick Saban from Miami. That's how much that guy, he's brought in billions, and he makes his 11 million, and it's what he brings to the school. It's like Coach Fraud there in Colorado. How happy are those people that they brought in Dion? It's not the football program, it's what he brings in terms of, you know, publicity to the program, the recruiting power, the TV money. And, you know, I think you're going to see a lot of that where they're hiring, you know, self-promotional coaches, and it's about the audience. It's about the money, of course. But Saban, I don't think that he's one of these guys where the players shouldn't be. I think that he's too intelligent a guy for that. I just think that the game's changed again, and he no longer wants to play it. It's just not worth it. And he also sees his advantage dwindling. Like, I think Saban has been planning this or considering it for a couple of seasons. And the reason I'll say that is because I know a couple of guys that I've worked with who are close to the program in Alabama. And I agree. I think Nick Saban, one of his greatest coaching jobs ever in college was this last year, especially after the start. He was dealing with a young team, a brand new quarterback. And I think Nick Saban, if it wasn't his greatest coaching job this year, it was pretty damn close to it. The other thing the players said, and I picked up on this early in the season, They said coach is more at ease. Coach is having more fun. We're seeing more laughter, more joking than ever before. Like, Saban's not a player's coach. I mean, it's a dictatorship. But the thing is, at 72 years old, he's so smart. He sees that the dictatorships are over. Dictatorships are over in pro sports. You know, the days of Bobby Knight and Scotty Bowman and Mike Babcock and Mike Ditka and all these guys, that's long over. So I think a guy like Saban adjusted better than anybody else. Like, this last year, he was probably as joyful and happy the players. It's funny to hear those sayings, like Nick Saban was, you know, relaxed and at ease. But I think that has something to do with the fact that he's adjusting to the players, and he knew that the finish line was soon. And I wasn't surprised at all when he made this announcement after I heard that, you know, he had a ton of fun this year. Talk about going out on a high. Even though he didn't win the national title, they weren't even supposed to be a team that was taken seriously. But also, you know, you look at the things, the old school way of doing things, and a guy like Nick Saban, and this came percolating out again, right? He can't hold his tongue. That's what makes him such a fucking great leader. I mean, he's a Churchill, this guy. He's a cleaner. He's a closer. He's a rainmaker. Wherever he goes, winning eventually happens. But I was just amazed when he made the comment about, you know, you gotta win with class and you gotta lose with class. And something like him, like, some people would say it's no big deal, but what happened after the Michigan game, the national championship bowl game, and, you know, guys throwing their helmets and guys kicking water bottles, and I know as a former coach that shit just drives you crazy if you're old school. Like, damn it, you're playing on the biggest stage in the world. You know, you've had a fantastic year. The game can go either way. You're coaching against Harbaugh. I mean, nobody expected you to be here. And then you lose and you go out. You know, Bush League, it's called in hockey. Like, that's when losing really stings, when you're emotionally drunk, I call it, and you're throwing helmets and you're blaming people and you're making excuses and you're throwing water bottles. And it's like, for fuck's sakes, you know, win with class and lose with class, especially when you win almost all the time. So that's something like that bothered Saban. It's not just him talking. Like, that stuff bothered him, and it's something he has to address. And it's just, it all goes back to a conversation I had a number of years ago. We're talking 18 years ago, when I was buying my Perth Blue Wings team. Okay. And I said to, actually 10 years ago, and I said to my friend, who's one of the top junior hockey coaches in the country. He went to the national championship every year, Jason Clark. And I was having breakfast with Clarky one morning, and I just bought the Blue Wings, and they were in last place, and, you know, just outhouse, problems off the ice, problems on the ice. That's how you buy things. Like Buffett said, if you're going to buy a business, whether it's a hockey team or a barber shop or an insurance agency, chances are it's going to be on the emergency operating table. It's not going to be at its peak most times. So I buy this hockey team that's on the emergency operating table. I'm going to turn it around. You know, we're the Yankees, we're the Canadians, we're the Dallas Cowboys of our community. I want to see this thing turned around, and I want to return it to all its glory, 85 plus years at the time. So I have breakfast with Clarky, and I'm like, we talk a little bit about, you know, how to sell tickets and corporate sponsorship. And I said, Clarky, I haven't coached in close to 15 years. I haven't blown the coaching whistle on ice in 15 years. I've been in the insurance business with my pop. And I said, what, if anything, is there any difference? I said, has the game changed? Like, have I become a dinosaur in terms of how to coach? And I'll never forget, Jason looked at me, took a sip of coffee, and he said, Coach, he said, the game has hardly changed. Sure, it's faster, the athletes are better, they're more serious. He says, you'll adjust all that stuff. He said, but the biggest change you're gonna notice since you blew the whistle 10, 15 years ago, he goes, is the level of selfishness. He goes, the level of selfishness of mom and dad, the level of selfishness of the athlete. He says, you're out recruiting these blue chip players. You're trying to get them to come to a program. You're trying to rebuild it. And he says, what's the first thing they ask you? And I said, guaranteed playing time. And he said, what do you tell them? And I say, there is no guaranteed playing time. You'll get what you earn and deserve. If you play 7 minutes or 27 minutes a game, you'll get what you'll deserve. And he says, good for you. He says, because that will repel 70 to 80% of these guys who don't give a shit about the league. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about the logo on the front of the jersey. And they don't give a shit about the Perth Blue Wings. And he says, what's the first thing that mom and dad always ask? And I was like, once again, what can you do for my kid? How much does he have to pay? Are you going to help out with billeting? Is he going to get gas money? All this stuff. And he's like, selfishness. He goes, the worst generation of parent ever. And he says, I raised my kids. He says, I'm part of that generation, and so are you. But he said, there's about 20% of the athletes left out there, he says, that you'll want to be part of your program. They want to earn their playing time. They want to win championships, which is very rare, and they're all in all the way. He goes, just like Saban says, Saban, when he's recruiting, he tells the parents and the kid, make a 40-year decision, not a 4-year decision. Like if you play for Nick Saban, you're making a 40-year decision because he's giving you a 4-year experience on and off the field that I would pay $1 million for my kid to be part of something like that. I've said that many times with the programs that I respect, and my 11-year-old is a little bit of an athlete, but I'm like, for her to be in a culture and be coached by somebody like that, I'd be willing to pay $1 million a year just for her to be part of it. So when Clarkie told me this, he said, just remember, you gotta preach teamwork, you gotta curate the 80% away from you that don't care. And he says the job's just getting tougher and tougher and tougher. It can still be done. He said, you will win. He says, we do win. He says, but you got to go in with your eyes open. He said, the level of selfishness and entitlement, he said, is off the charts. Off the charts. Hey, this was 10 years ago. This is 10 years ago, this story. So when I see Nick Saban say, the two questions that all the recruits and returning players ask is, how much do I get to play? And secondly, how much are you going to pay me? I can understand how at 72 he doesn't want to play that game. Now, if you're one of these wet behind the ears, young whiz kids, it's their time for that stuff. They're going to have to find a way to out-recruit other players. They're going to have to find a way to win in these selfish, entitled cultures, and they will. But for a guy like Saban, he's like, it's time for me to walk away into the sunset. He hasn't had to work in decades, but that's not what drives a guy like that. A guy like that is driven by national championships and building up high-performance people. I think a guy like that is so excited when he hears that one of his former players, not just played in the NFL, but also, maybe a former player is a CEO of a big corporation, or maybe he started a small business and he's, doing, he's an 8 or 9 figure entrepreneur. I think Saban, a guy like that, gets just as much out of that as he does from just the NFL. And that's what it's about. It's a factory for NFL future players. It's a factory for graduates, and it's a factory for high performance people. And he makes them make a 40-year commitment. That closing line right there, that USP that I used and Saban used, I learned it from him. Don't make a 4-year decision, make a 40-year decision. It doesn't apply anymore. Because these players, every fucking player in your locker room, every practice, every game, every mini camp, those guys are free agents. Free agents every damn year. It's not like you sign a player and you have them for 3 to 4 years. Every meeting, every time you make a correction, every time you enforce standards and rules, you have a locker room full of 85 free agents. And if they don't like it, on a certain day, okay, they can transfer. And as much as that's their right now, I can understand how an old school guy like Saban is like, how am I going to maintain standards? How am I going to continue to be a taskmaster coach when I have 85 free agents in my program? And that's where a guy like that's like, you know what? It's time. And as far as the money goes, I don't think he's as concerned about that as much as he's concerned about the fact that Alabama wins because of standards. The standard of skill, the standard of professionalism, the standards. If Nick Saban's known for one thing, it's the standards that he sets personally. Like nobody can outwork that cat. Nobody's more professional. Nobody's more committed. And that shit runs downhill. But when he has players asking before they've ever played a snap, entitled, selfish, lazy, what can you do for me? I think he just realized that it's going to be harder than ever to win a national championship. It's going to be harder than ever to build high performance people. And I think the fun was going to leave the game for him. Why the hell at age 72 not go on TV, hang out with Miss Terry, hang out with your grandchildren, reconnect with your children that you haven't seen in 40 or 50 fucking years, hang out at your lake house, get on TV and shoot your mouth off and just walk away into the sunset. I am so happy for Coach Saban. As much as I hate to see, Belichick gone and Pete Carroll gone and Mike Krzyzewski gone and like these guys, but it's time. And I would prefer to see them go out on their own terms instead of like the Bill Belichick where they tear the jersey off your back or they take the nameplate down. That's what Robert Kraft did. He had to take the nameplate down. Bill didn't know when it was time to go, and we don't know what happened behind the scenes, but damn it, Saban's gone out at the top of his game. Like that was one of his greatest coaching jobs ever. And even though they didn't win the national championship, man, they went out on top. And like he said, we got a hell of a team. He's leaving things better than he found them 17, 18 years ago. That's what it's all about. I'm going to write a lot more about this in this month's newsletter. If you're not a member of my Michael McLean newsletter, the link is below. You must be one dumb bunny. For $97 a month, I write a 22-page newsletter. I cut down a tree to print it, and I ship it to your house for $97, plus you get one of these black Be Relentless t-shirts. Are you kidding me? That's less than a Dunkin' Donuts coffee per day. I was at Dunkin's this morning at 7 o'clock, and guess what? My coffee cost me almost $4. My newsletter and my ramblings and rants about money and wealth and marketing and Nick Saban and Stephen King and whatever, $97 a month, less than $3.45 a day, less than a cup of coffee. The link is below, badassletter.com. That's badassletter.com. And I'm going to go deep on this, my experience in pro and amateur, my experience recruiting, and I'm just going to talk a little bit more of why a guy like Nick Saban finally decided to do the ultimate power move, and he literally walked away into the sunset on his own terms. He couldn't have picked it better. I mean, how you stay another season, is it any better? Maybe you win a national championship, but maybe you don't. And man, he's leaving with his head held high. He's leaving with his personal integrity. He's leaving with his standards. Man, I feel great for that old school guy. And the lives he's changed, the people he's put in the NFL, the men that he's created, but most importantly, the high performance people that he's helped mold. Man, oh man, there's a special place for that guy when it's all over. 2 words that changed my life. The link is below for the newsletter. You still have a couple of days, maybe one day. subscribe below and I'll send that to you in the mail. 2 words that changed my life, 2 words that'll change yours. Be relentless.